Larry, being very selfish and being Tasmanian and forgetting about the North Island for a little bit, what I really see is an opportunity if we've got 2.5 years as a platform, as the Premier sort of talking about, and it may be 3 years or 4. But what skills do you think are going to be most valuable sort of for Tasmania? Because at the end of the day, while I think most people in the room can see the opportunity, we also need to see the consumers using it, but what is the skill set that we need to be looking for?
So my reading of the lessons learned from the other major FTTP environments, so NTT, for instance, East and West in Japan, they host a major workshop on photonics at our institute every year and a half for the last 7 or 8 years. So we watched the entire rollout of fiber to the home in Japan from the inside. And then, of course, Verizon is the only telco in the U.S. that's committed to fiber to the home. In each of those cases, it turns out that there's not enough people in the local environment that's being rolled out that know the intricacies of fiber to the home. It's not copper. You know, there's 100 years of learning how to do stuff with copper. Glass is very different, and the optoelectronic devices that go in the home, all up and down the trunk. So Tasmania, I think, has a great opportunity, particularly with the emphasis on education and training, bringing up the general capability of your workforce that the Premier has talked about, to say, let's get into the training of these people, not just so we have enough that we can roll things out here, but that we can export talent to the rest of Australia and indeed the rest of the world as this need for people who are in this new engineering ecosystem. And again, I don't want to leave out the wireless of all this. You know, most people think of wireless as a very low bandwidth environment. Well, we all know that there's gigabit point-to-point wireless already. CSIRO is working on 10 gigabit. As we move to picocells and femtocells, essentially what you've got is the same spectrum, but many fewer people in it. And so they can get much more bandwidth per person, right? And so you're going to see, you know, LTE and some of the new follow-ons to Wi-Fi and so forth, megabits, 10 megabits, to individuals in the wireless. Okay, well, that's a very different world, and it's not your small fraction of a megabit to your cell phone. And so whenever that happens, just as someone who's worked in following exponentials, like, see, I'm now a Southern California guy, San Diego, so like I hang 10 on the exponential. Certain stuff. Anyway, the point is that my whole career has been around writing exponentials. And the beautiful thing about exponentials is they make the impossible routine in one e-fold. And so you're going to see what was impossible in the wireless space become routine in mass market in a very short time. And again, there's not many places where that's going to happen. And so, you know, 12 megabits per second through wireless to the individual, that's quite a claim. Boy, I wish I had that in the US.
Do you see any dangers in picking the wrong standards? Like, you know, is there a beta versus VHS? You touched on it this morning at the conference, at the speech. I just wondered, is there any dangers you see?
Yes, there is. The biggest concern I have is the break between the wholesale deployment of the government and the services that will be over it. I personally believe that there ought to be, the NBN ought to work in a way that brings the people who are interested in providing services over the NBN inside the tent as early as possible to go through not just standards, but, you know, there's lots of different sub-pieces that you have to decide. You know, there's in the photonics and the wireless, and good engineers will make choices. But you have, I mean, you've got video flows, you've got individual pictures, you've got things that are interactive, you've got things that are asynchronous, these all have different optimal solutions. Well, if you want a platform that's open for all of those solutions, you're going to make a kind of a different set of engineering choices. But the engineers left to themselves, and I love engineers, I am in the School of Engineering, well, they'll just build what they think is best. And that may or may not turn out to be flexible enough. Also, the best is going to change with time on a yearly basis. I mean, we were fortunate to be in a position where Mark Andreessen was an undergraduate working for me when they created NCSA Mosaic, which became Internet Explorer and Netscape Apache. In other words, the current global web. And when you live through something like that, every 6 months it's like a whole new universe. Like, at one point, Champaign-Urbana in East Central Illinois was the most hit spot on the web of the world. I mean, how crazy is that? But so we had to innovate in that kind of rate of change, and I think that that's what's going to happen. By the time that, let's think of it this way, think of 8 years from now, and the last of the 90% of homes in Australia is being connected to the NBN. Is that NBN going to be the same as Tasmania is going to be putting in now? So in the flexibility of the architecture of your engineering, are you building in that ability, or are you building a rigid, brittle architecture, which is more typical of what might be done by just engineering? So I think, anyway, to make a long story short, having the services, the people who are going to make money off of innovating companies that will supply new capabilities to the home or the small business, that they should somehow be able to get their voice into the NBN architecture decisions early, and, by the way, continuously. But that's not, I mean, I'm